Hello there, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope you are all well. Today I'll be reading a creepypasta called The Sweater. I hope you all enjoy, and if you do, please like and subscribe, and check this original story out at the description below. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Count Julius Productions. I didn't want the sweater in the first place. From the first time I ever laid eyes on the damn thing, I knew it would haunt me until the day I died. I first saw it in a thrift store window when I was 10 years old. It was a lumpy green thing made from thick yarn. An ugly monstrosity that looked like somebody's grandmother had knitted it badly. As much as I hated it, I was drawn to it. Even as I stared, I thought I could see a pair of two big eyes goggling at me from the pattern. Two sharp teeth floating amongst the swirls of thread seemed eager to bite me as I slid it on. The arms ended in little tassels that looked like claws. Sharp claws that looked like the needles. I hated it, but I was drawn to it in that way that children are drawn to anything that might end their perceived immortality. My mom must have noticed my interest. 2 weeks later, just as the autumn chill began to rise, she gave it to me one morning so I could wear it to school. She pulled it out from behind her back, flourishing it like it was the end of a magic trick. She smiled hugely, clearly thinking that she had something I really wanted. My stomach dropped when I saw it, and I was again filled with the sense of dread that she must have picked up on. "It's that sweater you like so much," she said, looking a little hurt. "You seem so taken with it that I went back and bought it for you." Mom didn't have the money to buy me much. Dad had left when I was a baby, and she worked as a waitress to put food on the table and a roof over my head. We didn't have a lot of money for presents, and I could tell that however much this sweater had cost was too much for me to act anything but grateful. I pulled it on, not really wanting it on my skin, but pretending it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was made of scratchy wool that I knew at first glance would make me feel way too warm. It rubbed at my skin like steel wool as it settled on my arms. It just felt wrong as it sat against my smooth skin, and I immediately wanted to take it off, like there were bugs in it. As I walked out the door, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe roaches or earwigs had gotten into the fabric. She walked me to the bus stop, all the while smiling at me as I pretended that the sweater wasn't the worst thing I'd ever worn. As the bus pulled away from the curb, I yanked it off and stuffed it in my backpack. My friend Mark looked at me strangely. "New sweater?" "Mom found it for me, but it's just about the most uncomfortable sweater ever." I thought it looked kind of cool, like Slimmer from the Ghostbusters. He commented. The movies were popular around this time, and I had to admit that it did look pretty ghoulish. The pattern on the front, big teeth and bug eyes, did look like the green ghost from the movie, and we talked about it all the way to school. I forgot all about the sweater until I got home that afternoon. I found it crumpled at the bottom of my backpack when I went to get out my homework. I took it out and laid it across the back of my desk chair. As I sat to do my homework, though, it began to itch at me. I took it and tossed it in a chair by the closet instead. Getting back to work. Even having it itch against my skin made me feel weird, and I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder at it as I did my homework. I felt like it was looking at me, somehow staring at me with those bug eyes, and I felt haunted by it as it sat placidly. When Mom came home a few hours later, she seemed happy to see the sweater. "I knew you would like it. Was it warm enough today?" "Yeah," I lied. "It was just right." I finished my homework and went downstairs to help with dinner. Typically, I would have sat in my room or watched television till dinner was made, but tonight all I wanted was an excuse to get out of my room and away from the sweater. My room felt invaded every time I looked at it, and I just wanted to be where it wasn't for a few hours. I didn't think about it again until it was time for bed. I came into my room, pajama bottoms and white undershirt on, with my mouth still feeling minty from my toothpaste. I was ready to climb into bed when I saw the sweater again. For some reason, I just couldn't stand looking at it anymore. I picked it up, and the coarse fabric scritching on my hands, and tossed it under the bed. I knew it meant nothing, a meaningless gesture, but I didn't want it watching me as I slept. Mom came in and kissed my forehead. "Good night, honey," she said as she turned off the lights and closed my door. I burrowed down under the covers and started getting sleepy. It had been a long day with another to follow, and as I began to edge towards sleep, I heard a weird noise from somewhere in my room. It sounded like someone dragging wire across the hardwood floor, and as I focused my attention on it, I could hear the sound sliding across the flooring. I sat up on my bed and looked for it. That harsh slither that wound its way over the boards. As I cast my eyes on the chair by the closet, I saw the source of the noise. It was the sweater. It was sitting on the chair where I had thrown it earlier, leering at me with its toothy grin. It couldn't be there. I had thrown it under the bed. But there it was, and there it sat, as though I had never grabbed it. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe I hadn't thrown it. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing, and now I was scaring myself. I rolled over and tried to get back to sleep. As I tossed and turned, though, I could almost feel those bug eyes looking at me. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to block it out. As I lay there, I imagined I could hear that wire dragging across wood again. It was like the scratching of claws times 10, and I could hear it going under my bed and towards the wall. I peeked out from under my covers and looked towards the chair, making sure that the hideous sweater was still there and not responsible for the noises. The chair was empty. I sat straight up and peered around in the semi-dark, searching for the sweater. It couldn't have moved. It was just a sweater. A stupid sweater. Even my 10-year-old brain knew that sweaters didn't just get up and move around on their own. I looked over at the edge of my bed, seeing nothing, and hesitantly I hung upside down so I could glance under the bed. In my 10-year-old brain, that was where the monsters lived, and the sweater had become a monster now. I peeked, afraid to see it, but it wasn't there. Only a few toys and dirty clothes greeted me. I looked back at the chair, still finding it empty, and snuggled down under the covers so I could get some sleep. I awoke in the morning with a terrible pain on my arm. The sweater was in bed with me, curled around my arm as though I'd gone tangled with it in the night, and I wrenched it off violently. I didn't want it to touch me. I didn't want it in contact with my skin. As it came free, I saw the source of my pain. On my forearm, on the inside of the arm, was what looked like a bite. I inspected it in the dewy morning light and felt sure I could pick out individual teeth marks in the flesh of my arm. I looked fearfully at the crumpled green garment in the corner, and suddenly felt sure that it was the source of that bite. I ran downstairs to show my mother, who was just starting to set out the breakfast things. She looked at the bite and declared it a rash. Probably from the new sweater, she said, and I could hear real sadness in her voice. She still believed I really liked that ghastly thing, and the thought that it had caused me pain made her sad. She said she would wash it today after school and have it back to me by tomorrow. And I remember hoping that it shrank in the wash. I thought of all day about the terrible garments coming back too small or shredded by some fluke, and the idea brought me some little joy throughout the day. When I got home, however, I heard the washing machine in full swing and found a note on the table that Mom had gone grocery shopping. I figured she had put the sweater in with the load and went upstairs to start my homework. Mark and Davy wanted to ride bikes later, and I knew if I got my math done before dinner, I would be able to go riding with them before the sun went down. When I opened the door, I was startled by the green sweater sitting on the chair where it had been last night. I was angry at myself a moment later. Why was I so afraid of this stupid sweater? I grabbed it up, the yarn digging into my hand like steel wool, and took it to the laundry room. I opened the washer and threw it inside, slamming the lid closed and stomping back upstairs to start my homework. I finished quickly, and when Mom got home, I went outside to play. I spent the afternoon riding bikes and jumping dirt ramps with my friend, and then the street lights came on. I returned home. When it came time for bed, I walked back up to my room to find the sweater back on the chair where it had been earlier. There was a stack of freshly folded clothes on the dresser, but for some reason, Mom had put the sweater back on the chair. I walked around the sweater as I got ready to go to bed, but I kept thinking I could see it move out of the corner of my eye. It didn't leave the chair, but I thought I saw the arms wiggle or the waistline shiver slightly as I walked around the room. I went straight to bed after lights out, and in the morning I found more bites on my arm. 3 new bites to be exact. Each one was on the underside of my arm, and not on the outer arm where someone might notice them easily, and each of them looked like the first one. The sweater wasn't in bed with me this time, but I knew it had been the one to do it. Mom still thought it was a rash, but I was convinced they were bites. For the next few weeks, I tried various measures to keep the sweater away from me. I left it in other rooms, sometimes locked it in other rooms, but it always found its way back to my room. The closet was no obstacle for it, and twice I awoke to see it sitting in the chair, as the door slowly closed behind it. One night, I stuffed it into the washing machine and closed the door locking behind it, but I still awoke the next morning to find it in my bed. My sleep started to suffer, and I found it hard to get a full night's sleep as I awoke to search for the sweater. My teachers told my mother that my performance was suffering, and I was given DRs several times for sleeping in class. If they had seen what was under the sleeves of my long-sleeve shirts, they would probably have some questions for my mother too. The bites were numerous, red and oozing blood sometimes, and I kept them closely guarded, secret from both my teachers and my mother. My relationship with my mother became strained. She knew I wasn't sleeping well, but she wouldn't even entertain the idea that it was due to some evil sweater. She thought I was just looking for attention, that I was just a typical child with an overactive imagination. But she couldn't take off work just to sit at home with me and protect me from a piece of clothing. At one point, she even threw the sweater in the garbage, thinking that would solve everything. But when it appeared in my bedroom, she accused me of keeping it around just to get attention. After 2 weeks of being terrorized, I decided to finally put a stop to it. That night, I stayed awake and watched it. The next day was Saturday, and I knew my mom wouldn't care if I slept in. I was going to catch it in the act and show Mom that it was hunting me. Maybe then she would let me get rid of it. I had a big metal flashlight and a thick blanket I was going to catch it in. I would hold it onto it until it ran out of steam, and then show it to Mom so she wouldn't think I had been dreaming. I watched the red numbers on my Ninja Turtles alarm clock tick by slowly, oh so slowly, and by 11:30 I was having trouble staying awake. The sweater hadn't done anything but sit there all night, and as my eyes got heavier and heavier, I found myself slipping towards sleep. I lost the fight before midnight and woke up with my head across the blanket. I looked at the clock. The numbers read 2:45 a.m., and I swept the lights towards the chair as I tried to orient myself. The beam fell upon an empty chair, and I felt my dread mounting. Where had it gone? Had it slipped off the chair while I was asleep? As I searched for it in the beam of my light, I heard the familiar sound of wires scraping against wood behind me. I turned the beam to my headboard, and there was the sweater. I thought for a moment I might be dreaming, but as the flashlight illuminated it, I had to come to grips with the idea that what I was seeing was real. The bug-eyed pattern had become a real set of bulbous eyes. The green body a bulbous mass of fibers and filaments, and the teeth had become large and snapping. It was perched on my headboard, clearly startled by the sudden intrusion of light. It emitted a loud, otherworldly scream as it leapt at my face, and I swung the flashlight without thinking. It smacked onto it with a soft whoof sound, and I watched it fall to the floor next to my closet and go still. The beam fell on it and scrambled across the floor as I frantically crawled for the bed. I sat on the bed and listened to it rustling beneath the box spring. I had glimpsed its true form now. I had seen the wicked teeth that had left their mark on my arms, and I was not about to let it sink them into me ever again. I jumped out of the bed, flipping on the lights, and scooped up the sweater as I headed down the hall. The hall closet was stuffed with old tubs for storage. As I wrenched open the closet, I found what I was looking for on the second shelf. Mom had an old popcorn tin, the kind people give you for Christmas, when you're not sure what to give them. As I reached for it, I felt the sweater screech and scramble towards me. It knew what I wanted to do, and it knew that it would be stuck if I did. I grabbed it before it could latch onto me, and stuffed it down the metal guts of the tin. I was going to trap it in here for a good long time, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. In the light, it was just an ordinary sweater, and stuffed into the tin, I heard it thrashing about, and held the lid closed as I looked around for the duct tape to hold it closed. I'd like to say that was the end of the ordeal after I put a few layers of tape over the lid, and felt confident that it wouldn't be able to escape. I stacked a few boxes on top of it for good measure and left it thrashing at the bottom of the closet, and I went to sleep. I could still hear it beating feebly at its prison. The noise was like a lullaby for my tired soul. Sadly, that was not the reason I'm writing this now. It's been over 25 years since that night, and I had all but forgotten about the ordeal. I had put it off as the overactive imagination as a child, just like my mother, until I came home from work today. After college, I moved several states away to a job as an architect for a big firm in Chicago. There I met Emily, and now we have a child of our own, my daughter Carrie. My mother loves her granddaughter and comes to see her whenever she can. But most of the time, my mother's presence is felt through her care packages, cookies, toys, anything to make her daughter smile. My daughter smile. And when I got home today, I found one of those packages open on the kitchen table. The box was empty, but there was a note inside addressed to Carrie. Hi, Carrie. Grandma was cleaning out the attic and found something you might like. It was your dad's when he was your age, and he used to make up the strangest stories about it. It looked so lonely when I found it, and I thought you might have more use for it in the Windy City than I would. Love, Grandma. My blood ran cold. What had my mother found tucked away in the attic? I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room, catching sight of my daughter as she lay on the living room floor. She was coloring something in her binder, using her crayons to fill in whatever picture she had just drawn. At that moment, my only focus was the familiar green sweater she was wearing. The yarn was just a little faded, but the bug eyes still stared at me, and the teeth again smiled with that delicious mirth. As I stared, it seemed to say, "Hello, old friend. You thought you'd gotten rid of me, but here I am. Time for our game to start again." Carrie turned around and smiled at me, springing up and wrapping her hands around me in a hug. I had to stop myself from shuddering as the sweater touched me, and she stepped back a little so I could see it when she was done. She did a little twirl so I could see the whole thing, and it didn't even seem to repulse her the ways it always repulsed me. "Isn't it great, Daddy? Grandma sent me this cool new sweater. I love it. It's so soft and so warm." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded dumbly and walked back into the kitchen to fix myself a drink. After the second drink, I began to calm a little and started writing this after my hands stopped shaking. Now, I don't have a clue what to do, How do you tell your daughter that she's wearing something that tormented you for 2 weeks? How do you convey to her something that she loves is evil? What do I do when the bites start appearing? How do I rid myself of this evil sweater? How indeed. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel a lot. See you next time.